मतलब
अबे
आपने तू भी देखा?
अबे अर्नब उन लोगों में
नहीं,
से
Arnab
हेडलाइन
just
पढ़ के
hasn't
just
seen
to be
it.
part of the news he will say something and then he will walk away from the topic.
नहीं, we specifically set up the TV right away yesterday, so our plan was to watch
Yeah, so
Drishyam 2,
basically
but फिर time नहीं
he
मिला.
does,
And that
So
the
for our
that
audience,
the
our very own Rajiv
in
Masand and Taran Adarsh
oh
in our
thank
group
you.
have watched Drishyam 2
Akash stop
and they
speaking
are going to
reporting
give
from
us
the
a
scene. मैं
review.
बताना चाहता हूँ हमारे सारे व्यूअर्स को कि दृश्यम 2 इतनी अच्छी मूवी थी क्योंकि हमें उम्मीद थी कि इतनी बकवास मूवी होगी पर इसकी वजह से मुझे मूवी इतनी एवरेज अबव एवरेज नहीं मैं मजाक कर रहा हूँ काफी अच्छी मूवी है क्योंकि पूरे टाइम तुम्हें लगता है कि यार 2.5 घंटे का काटेंगे पर वो 2.5 घंटे का नहीं काटते.
by the way,
इसमें
कोई spoilers मत देना,
इस
हम
मूवी का
हमने
ट्विस्ट
देखेंगे
है
अभी
कि
so.
ट्विस्ट
नहीं
what एंड में आता है
अमृत.
बस.
Oh, thanks Amrit.
The movie starts off very slow. Initially it was very slow, but like so initially the first 45 minutes I felt it was crap, and then I like how they connected everything towards the end. So there was a reason why they were showing all that. So that
By
was
the way,
really
for
impressive.
our audience, we are talking about Drishyam 2, not 1.
हाँ
Connected matlab you're talking about within the same movie or like connected with Drishyam the
within the same movie.
within the same
यार
movie, the
उन्होंने
first
जिस तरीके
45
से हर
minutes
चीज
of
को
the
कनेक्ट
movie.
किया ना पहले कुछ 50 मिनट तुम्हें लगेगा कि तुम कोई स्लाइस ऑफ लाइफ फीचर देख रहे हो पता नहीं क्या चल रहा है मजाक चल रहा है बट उसके बाद द वे दे वर एबल टू लाइक यू नो ग्रेजुअली द टेंशन स्टार्ट्स राइजिंग and it turns into a very proper very well put together Indian crime thriller I would say.
And acting Mohanlal
No,
was
Bhai,
good.
for somebody who is such a popular actor and could easily turn it into a very mass thing, he maintains face throughout. Like that is done very well.
Yeah, they don't have any
Nothing,
fight scene
nothing.
unnecessary or
So इसमें भी मोहनलाल ही
nothing
है
like that.
Drishyam 2 में भी.
Same.
They
Drishyam
actually
2
portrayed him
continues
as a
6 years after Drishyam 1. That's the only thing we can say.
Oh, okay. But it's
Yeah.
not related.
Completely related.
Oh, so
Abhi
Akash, then you
movie-
might have to watch Drishyam 1 first.
So it's a direct sequel. So you do need to watch Drishyam, the original.
And
to
if you
watch the
and if you want to
sequel.
make things spicy, Drishyam पहले देखने के बाद you can watch all the regional remakes that were made. I think हर southern language में और हिंदी में भी बनाई है.
Yeah, I don't have time for this. Okay, I don't have time. Actually, I'll have time a lot of
Please
time.
do not
but
watch
still.
the. I think the one with Kamala Hassan was very disappointing. I tried watching
नहीं,
it.
Akash, if you
Acting-wise,
want
it
to
was
watch
very
Drishyam 2, first you have
disappointing.
to watch all the 5 remakes. Only then you are allowed to watch Drishyam 2. Or you could do what I did the first time. Drishyam जब famous हुई थी, मैंने जाके Wikipedia पे story पढ़ी, and then I saw clips of the movie, and that's how I saw Drishyam 1. So,
Akash,
I was going to say Amrit is gatekeeping the movie, and then he says he read Wikipedia and he watched clips on YouTube. So I was going to be like, wow, what
Akash,
a
you should
fan.
watch it in Malayalam. You can make someone proud.
हाँ,
True.
आजकल के टाइम
Everyone says the
आकाश
original
आजकल
is
के
the
टाइम में
best.
might be आजकल के टाइम
और अमृत नहीं.
Let him speak, Kevin. Don't free speech है.
केविन इतना बोलता है ना बट एक्चुअली ये प्रॉपर फैशन मेरा फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन तो है ही नहीं मतलब
सही में बेचारे को बोलने नहीं दिया.
नहीं, you express it way too much.
I edited one of our extra episodes of it, and my God, did I have to censor a lot. One of our
कौन था
extra
सबसे
episodes.
बदतमीज
I'm not going to say it. Let our audience think which episode I'm talking about. They'll find out once they hear it which one has the most sense.
तो मुझे ही नहीं पता कि मैंने अच्छा हम में से किसी को नहीं पता.
Yeah. No, I got it.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Vele podcast. This is the podcast where 4 friends gather around to talk about a variety of topics. I am your host Akash, and with me are my friends Kevin. Nini.
What's up?
Okay, I was going to say take your time. Arnav.
Hello.
And Amrit.
मैं नहीं कह रहा.
He's not going to say anything. Okay. So this episode we'll be talking about climate change. With the tragic natural disaster of the glacial burst that took place in Uttarakhand, we thought we should talk about climate change for this episode. But before we start the topic off, we want to give our condolences to the people and families who have lost someone to this disaster. And we hope all the people who are missing are found and are alive. If you would like to make a donation, we'll leave a link in the description of this episode. First, let's talk about what is climate change, and I'll pass it over to Amrit and Kevin for that.
मैं नहीं
Arnav
I
and
also
Kevin.
wanted to say
Arnav and
that,
Kevin, sorry.
मतलब
Arnav and Kevin.
जबरदस्ती है
Amrit was on my lips.
But before we start, like a quick question. अब तुम्हें याद है कि when was the first time you understood the concept of climate change? Because I was trying to think yesterday and I had no answer. Like, was it in school? Was it in college?
Yeah, because Arnav, unlike you, who wasted most of his time in school, I used to watch this documentary called Captain Earth, Captain Planet. उसमें ना 5 लोग अपनी उनकी रिंग से निकलता था
Used to wear power rings.
हाँ, और एक बार क्या होता, कैप्टन प्लैनेट कीचड़ में फंस गया. फिर कैप्टन प्लैनेट ने कहा क्योंकि बच्चे प्लास्टिक फेंकते हैं इसलिए कैप्टन प्लैनेट मर गए. और I was so happy कि मर गया ये. अच्छा हुआ, किसी काम का
I used
था
to get very annoyed at him. Basically, if I threw a bag of empty crisps at him, he would be dying.
Yeah, that's what I
It was
thought.
very funny to me.
मेरा एक नॉर्मल क्वेश्चन था कि तुमने कब क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में पढ़ा?
No, that's why.
No, but it had such a good song. It had such a good
Captain
intro.
Planet,
Amrit, you'll sing it
ये
for us.
है hero.
Exactly.
Captain Planet, ये है hero. आगे
Aye,
आदमी है
he's
मुझे.
singing the villager version. Of it. The English version was better.
What do you mean by
Oh, I
this?
forgot.
Oh wait, this was Arnav's
Okay.
prepared intro.
This was not
Yes,
a prepared
yes, we
intro.
overtook our...
This
Wait,
was not
I
prepared. I
also-
just realized yesterday because
Arnav was asking us a
also want-
good question of when we started learning about climate change and when we heard of
पर
it.
मैंने-
You took it,
भाई,
but he's
मैंने-
not wrong.
No,
That's
That's
Captain
but-
Planet.
literal-
but
that's
अगर
when I first
कार्टून में
heard.
एक्चुअली कुछ सिग्निफिकेंट है कंटेंट जो बच्चे समझ पाए, इट्स ग्रेट वे टू पास ऑन द नॉलेज, राइट? इफ इट हैज, मैंने देखा नहीं है जो भी कार्टून बात कर रहे हो.
No, it was
But
good.
yeah,
It was
like-
good,
like-
but it didn't make sense. Like,
अबे,
what are 5 elements? Amrit, okay, Amrit knows at this. Arnav, name the 5 natural elements. Okay, fire, water, earth,
Sky,
wind. What is the 5th
sky.
element? Nee, it's your heart. Arnav. Heart. Apparently, I have no idea why it is, but
Okay,
that
this is
cartoon
way
अबे,
it
too
was.
it's the same
I have
way.
no idea why.
अरे अर्नव को ये सब नहीं बताना, ये सब ये देखता नहीं था. पर ऐसा एक और बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कार्टून था जिसने वेट लिफ्टिंग को फेमस किया इंडिया में. छोटा भीम देखा है तुमने कभी? सेम तरीके से. It's a वेट लिफ्टिंग और हेल्थ एंड फिटनेस.
I thought he was going to say Johnny
विदेशी
Bravo or
कार्टून की
something.
बात
Johnny
करते हैं.
Bravo showed people how to be a
Kevin.
dick to other girls, basically.
So okay, basically
But-
let's go back to the topic.
Yeah.
Oh, I know we talked about Uttarakhand, but like I was going to say one more thing, like what Texas is going through currently
Also,
is
actually
also
relevant that.
a form of consequence of
Yes.
climate change.
Kevin,
Also-
जो हमारे टॉपिक है वो भी इस पे भी तू ही बात कर ले फिर.
हाँ, सच में.
So
वैसे
let's start
you've
from very
taken mine and
basic, right?
Amrit's part.
Climate change
Arnav.
101 का या. So we'll try to keep it as simple as possible, जिससे अपना wide variety of audience जो अपने 5 साल के बच्चे भी अपना podcast सुनते हैं, right? And all the way till 50, so they all can understand. We will try to keep it that way. Hopefully, we have some
Oh,
audiences.
Arnav, to answer your question, I think early 20s is when I actually started to focus into it. I did know climate change in school, but never thought about it until
Same.
like college.
मेरा भी same
days.
था. I was yesterday में बैठ के सोच रहा हूँ, when did I actually started thinking about it? It was very recently, in past 10 years, I would say. 10 years sounds like a huge, but I'm pretty old now. So yeah. So let's go. No, not 35. So let's start from very basic, right? See, Earth's atmosphere होता क्या है? So in basically, think about it as a blanket, literally as a blanket, which has covered our planet, and primarily it consists of all the gases. So the two of the main gases are nitrogen and oxygen. I think nitrogen is almost close to some 70-80%. Then 20 or 21% is oxygen, and very minute percentage of gases are responsible for a very good effect, which actually protects the life on Earth and actually helps us survive. So because of sun's radiations and sunlight, planet would have been basically planet temperature would have been much different. And what these gases do is they basically try to retain some of these gases into our Earth's atmosphere. So because of which our temperature remains in a balance. Otherwise, like thousands of years back, millions of years back, actually our planet was extremely cold. And so life is not a sustainable thing us temperature mein. But what these gases have done is they have protected the Earth's atmosphere, our planet, by freezing it below zero. So that's the whole purpose of these minute gases. Even though they are very low in number, that's their main effect. And usually we call this effect as a greenhouse effect. So they have covered and I know we have studied like 5 different layers of Earth's atmosphere, troposphere, stratosphere, but we are talking in general right now. All these consist of mainly gases, and they are responsible for protecting the life on Earth, right? So this is Earth's atmosphere. And apart from these nitrogen, oxygen, some of the gases which I just mentioned are three. I will just focus on three. I won't go into detail. I think we have Kevin and everyone to go into detail about it. So water vapor, carbon dioxide, and methane. These are three of the most responsible gases for controlling the Earth's temperature, right, to optimal level. And I think right now the average temperature it's 15 degrees Celsius. Just keep that number in mind for time being. So
You fucking people farting everywhere with your methane out of your asses. Control yourselves, you monsters.
वो मीथेन नहीं होता,
Anyway, carry on.
वो H2S होता है.
wait,
Fart do you do,
Hydrogen
man?
sulfide.
Anyway, quickly moving on. I have no idea what fart Amrit does, but anyway.
That's why the college days pe our bathroom used to be in horrible
Oh
state.
my god, college days में
मैं बोलूं कॉलेज मैं तेरी कहानी बताऊं. अभी जो क्लाइमेट चेंज की सारी वार्मिंग आ जाएगी बाहर अभी हैं.
Anyway, enough continue.
Yeah, so that's the
Fact, I was just
Earth's
saying
atmosphere, right? Let's
bathroom.
keep that on the side. Now let's talk about what is weather. So weather basically refers to all the atmospheric conditions which happen in a short period of time. So rain, snow, cold, ये सब जो है, these are short-term weather patterns, right? And what is climate change is basically it's exactly the same thing, but it's a long-term change in the average weather patterns. So whether we might be getting more rain than expected, we might be getting more heat, more cold. So it's a very broad category. Climate change does not mean only heat. It's just a change in weather patterns. Yeah, Amrit?
तो बेसिकली ये जो क्लाइमेट होता है वो बस एक शॉर्ट टर्म चीज है. उसको हम बोलते हैं कि इतने महीने के लिए ऐसा होता है, तो ये एक शॉर्ट टर्म चीज को बोलते हैं.
No, climate is a long term thing. Weather is a short term.
वेदर इज द शॉर्ट टर्म थिंग. तो लाइक हम जो मॉनसून और समर वगैरह में जो हमने डिवाइड किया चार, वो दोस आर जस्ट एसेंशियली कुछ महीने के क्लस्टर्स ऑफ one certain climate. Okay.
Yeah, those are like seasons which we get.
And they not able to predict it is the problem, and essentially that causes our like we have to adjust to it. Think about our plants, that we are supposed to be the most smarter creation, and we have to adjust to this change of pattern. But now think about all the other livings.
Weather app, it tells me when it rains.
Because they
It predicts very well.
But
no, it doesn't.
On that point, so weather we can predict pretty easily because it's a short term thing, right? The problem with climate change, since it's over decades, over 100 years, thousands years, right? That's where the actual problem is. It's hard to predict. I think that's what Kevin was referring to, but we'll go into that later on. So these are two different phenomena, right? Weather is a short term thing, climate is a long term thing, and majority of these
we are not even able to predict correctly next year's climate changes. Like our drought periods have still not been predicted. So like a lot of the areas that are going through long periods of drought, essentially that was never part of any prediction.
Akash.
No, Kevin is right about that. On my research as well,
so
El Nino, which I'll get into it.
I know we are looking at like majority people are just thinking, oh, this is a 300-year problem. No, but like even 1 year down the line, we are not 100% sure. Like example, the Houston case is an example of it. Nobody could predict.
So there are reasons for the climate change, right? So one is the human activities, which Kevin will go into later on, and there's also natural activities which cause climate change over a number of years, right? So some of the very basic things can be all the way from sun's ka jo pattern hai, the amount of radiation which they emit, they can change, and we haven't reached that stage where we can predict the sun ke kya cycles hai, right? The waves which they emit, they can change, which can cause fluctuations in our climate. All the way from volcanic activity.
मैंने तो सुना है कि sun तो अभी technically for it in its part it's going to stay stable for people are assuming for a billion more years, like a lot more years. Like is there something different in the way it's emitting radiation?
Yeah, so have you heard of if there are lots of like NASA के बहुत सारे telescopes हैं which actually see the output of the sun's का waves, right? There are actually storms on the sun. बहुत बार storms आते हैं, and those heat waves जो आती हैं, they have an impact on all the neighboring planets, right? So it happens. So it can happen anytime. We don't know कि वो कब आते हैं cycles, but sun, as वहाँ पे you're right, sun in itself as a whole entity is quite stable for billions of years, but उसमें जो उसके खुद के जो storms आते हैं sun में, so there are actually lots of very nice videos on NASA.
Is it stuff like the solar flares and so क्या कहते हैं?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So the sun का output है, it can sometimes vary. So because of that also climate change का impact आता है, right? So all the way
is that a major influence on climate change?
Honestly, I don't know. क्योंकि I'm referring to is all the natural sources right now.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'm honestly not sure कि इसमें से major कौन सा है. Like volcanic activity is another one, and some of the, I think Kevin will go into
We
another.
can't control those. We
Yeah,
can't
we can't
control those. So
control.
there's no point of
That's
even discussing
unpredictable
it.
and uncontrollable.
Yeah, so
No.
majority of these activities which we cannot control, and they are the ones who contribute majority of the climate change, and which is natural. That has been happening over decades and years, right? So what we will be focused on primarily is for the human activities which we can control, which we go into later stage, right? So this is what climate change is, right? It's a change of average weather patterns in the long run. So what specifically right now in past, as I mentioned, 50 degrees centigrade is a average temperature, right, which we are supposed to be in a way right now to sustain life on earth. What has happened in past, I would say 100 200 years, especially in last 50 years, it has accelerated quite a lot, is the increase in the average global temperature on this planet. So now it has increased by 1 degree Celsius, the average temperature. So 15 is a baseline, so now it's up 1 degree uske upar, right? So this phenomena is basically what we refer to as global warming, where the whole planet is warming up because of the the gases which I initially talked about, which were in the Earth's atmosphere, right, which are responsible for retaining heat.
So ये
Those
temperature is the temperature of the our literal atmosphere का average temperature है ये. Okay.
Correct, yeah. So what
Yeah.
जो gases which are responsible for the temperature, उसका particles बढ़ गए हैं. So they call it particles, ppm they call it, right? So उसकी intensity बढ़ रही है. The number of particles are increasing in the atmosphere, primarily carbon dioxide, right? So the way carbon dioxide works is basically it traps the heat. In a very simple example, it traps the heat and then it emits it over a long period of time. It radiates it back to the Earth's atmosphere. These, by the way, the heat which is not trapped directly coming from sun, this is the heat which actually enters our Earth's atmosphere, hits the Earth's surface, and when it radiates back, that's the time all these greenhouse gases, they capture this
The
heat.
heat.
Every greenhouse gas has its different potential to capture heat. Water vapor captures majority of the heat, then carbon dioxide and methane, right? These are top three greenhouse gases. And this is basically this constitutes the global warming effect, because now, because of all the human activities, concentration of these particular gases are increasing, because of which the temperature eventually rises over the period of time. And there's obviously the naysayers ki are temperature is only rising like 1 degree Celsius in past 50 100 years, right? But people don't realize even a 1 degree Celsius, the impact it has on our Earth's atmosphere. And for a very simple thing, jo ice melt hone lag jati hai over a long period of time, that causes the sea level to go up. And once the sea level goes up, we all know the coastal cities have already started facing its impact. We can talk about it later on. So one more aspect is, it's not only even though it's carbon dioxide is the main thing which is blamed, the underlying principle is water vapor is the actual one which is causing more harm, right? So what happens, it's a cycle. So carbon dioxide, it captures heat, it raises the temperature.
Yeah.
When the temperature of atmosphere is high, it retains more water vapor. As it retains more water vapor, it causes more heat then, right? So end of the
Yeah.
day, it comes down to water vapor is one of the crucial elements of it. Carbon dioxide has to be controlled, but because of which water vapor ka level increase ho jata hai, because now in a hotter climate we can retain more water vapors
Yeah.
are retained. So I think this is the whole concept of global warming, basically, jahan pe it's a cycle. We increase gases, carbon dioxide, methane in the atmosphere. Those end up heating the atmosphere. That in turn retains more water vapors. And as we all know, water vapors ki apne paas shortage nahi hai yahan pe, right? And so if you read about water cycle, how it evaporates from all the majority of our ocean surfaces, and 70% is water on this planet. So this we refer to as global warming, where average increase in Earth's temperature over the long period of time is what we call as global warming. So isme what causes global warming? I think Kevin can also go in deeper about it. What causes global warming? These are the gases, but how they cause it, I think Kevin will be able to cover it.
Yeah, so that's essentially, we talk about the greenhouse effect in this module. So like essentially,
Yeah, where they use
if you guys have you guys seen a
Yeah.
greenhouse? Essentially, how like tomatoes are grown the most in greenhouses.
Does a
So
greenhouse
it's like a
literally mean
glass
that
roof.
indoor facilities होती है जिसमें लोगों के घर के अंदर garden होता है type? Is that what it means?
Essentially, but there are full houses like where there are plants inside.
Okay.
Essentially, it is made of glass, and the greenhouse effect is essentially these gases that are nowhere discussed, like CO2 and nitrous oxide, etc. they form the atmosphere essentially, and that acts like a roof over the earth, and that's what traps the heat. So it's like a greenhouse itself. So as your quantity of CO2, which is carbon dioxide or methane, etc., increases, the process of capturing that heat also increases, and that is why our temperature is increasing. So um, so the greenhouse, the reason why greenhouses are built is essentially the heat from the sun heats up the plant and the air in the greenhouse during the daytime, and during night when the temperature drops, the some of these plants need to be maintained in a certain temperature, and those glass roofs maintain that temperature. So you can just think, now you can picture those gases as like a glass roof over around your hearth. So Arnav, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so Kevin got explained exactly the same thing which is happening on Earth's level, right? We create greenhouses to survive the life, like whichever plant or whichever crop they're
Yeah.
growing. Earth's atmosphere plays the exact same role. So those are the like two similarities between these two things. Both ka purpose same hai, to survive, to sustain life, and only thing the problem is becoming Earth's atmosphere is becoming more of those gases. Even though it's a like very small percentage, that heat retention that's what matters, right? So oxygen and nitrogen, they don't retain heat. उसके जो molecules होते हैं, but like these greenhouse gases, they are
CO2
supposed to be retaining heat. I think that's the
तो ये
main
जो
culprit.
तो इसको ग्रीन हाउस इफेक्ट इसलिए बुलाते हैं क्योंकि तो जस्ट टू कंफर्म कि तुम कह रहे हो कि ये जो एटमॉस्फेयर है इट्स एक्टिंग लाइक द रूफ ऑफ अ फिजिकल ग्रीन हाउस दैट्स होल्डिंग द हीट इन and warming things up. Is that what it means? Is that why it's
Yeah.
called that?
Yeah, it's a blanket.
So if your CO2 and your methane, methane is CH4, right? It doesn't matter.
CH4.
Yeah.
Methane and carbon dioxide, as that increases, your temperature, like the warmer your Earth is going to get. That essentially is the main concept.
तो जितना
So
ज्यादा
now
हम ये गैस एमिट करते हैं उतना ज्यादा अर्थ गर्म होते जाता है. Essentially, it's trapped inside.
It's part of the process.
Okay.
Yeah. And the most CO2 comes, and another thing I wanted to discuss was how it has a direct effect on our oceans as well. So your CO2 reacts, as CO2 increases in your air, CO2 reacts with salt water, which is our seawater. So the moment that happens, CO2 dissolves into the seawater, and this reaction is called the carbonic acid. And this process is called the ocean acidification. So when this process happens, this breaks into there are two ions that are broken into: the lower bicarbonate ion, which is a smaller quantity it breaks down into, and as this reaction keeps occurring, there is a higher amount of hydrogen ions. So the main problem with this is our shell creatures, like our yeah, great reefs, all these things that rely on these
Oceanic life is affected by this essentially.
Specific oceanic life currently.
Okay.
Specific oceanic lives that are shell that fall under the shell creatures category. They are the ones that are currently getting affected the most, because these bicarbonate ions is what they use to make their shell itself. So it's a question of their survivability itself altogether.
So Kevin, you're saying that more of this iron is formed, yeah, it's destroyed.
It's more of these ions are as this reaction keeps happening, there is more hydrogen breaking, ions coming into water, and less of bicarbonate ions happening. That is what is happening. So as this reaction keeps increasing, that's the process that's going to keep happening. There's going to be an imbalance of these ions.
So what Kevin
you can
just
picture
explained,
it as you can picture it as like okay, if it was before, it was 2:1 ratio, now it has become 4:1 ratio. Like if you can picture that way.
Oh, so now it's
So
more.
now
तो
it
okay,
is
I was going to say कि CO2 तो already exist करता है हमारे atmosphere में उस तरीके से, तो it must have been reacting anyways. तो you're saying कि जब ये अभी क्योंकि हम और CO2 pump कर रहे हैं, so once it combines with
that
seawater और
reaction
ये
keeps.
तो ये जो तूने कार्बोनिक एसिड का फॉर्मेशन बोला था जिसको एसिडिफिकेशन कहते हैं, ये स्प्लिट मारता है और एक्सेस क्वांटिटी में वो चीज फॉर्म हो रही है जो डेट्रीमेंटल है ओशियनिक लाइफ के लिए.
Exactly.
इज दैट
और
Oceanic
जो
life,
चाहिए
yeah.
वो कम हो रहा है.
ओके ओके ओके.
तो essentially ये एक चीज अपने को like one thing we have to remember is like ocean acidification जो measure है वो है pH level. तो in the last since industrial revolution the pH level of our ocean has increased by 29%, and major of this contribution, about 19% of this contribution has happened in the last 10 years. So now you can understand the significance of our problem. This is not just affecting our earth, like our surface where we are living, but it's also affecting the oceans. And there is another reason why I brought up the ocean part. So like we discussed about the temperature around the earth and the atmosphere temperature is increasing, the ocean temperature, when carbon dioxide is reacting with water, your ocean temperature is also increasing, which is why this is why the rate of like, okay, fresh water availability is another thing in question. Technically we should not have that problem. 30% or 29% of our earth is fresh water, but one thing that we forget is that majority of this water is in what form? It's frozen, right?
फ्रोजन ग्लेशियर फॉर्म में होता है ना.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's frozen. So now because of salt water being temperature increasing, your atmosphere temperature increasing, this melting of glaciers and dumping into ocean has that process has become faster.
Oh, I
You
thought
can pick if you want to.
our freshwater supply was like very low, like क्या 2.7 or something. I thought always.
When you
It
fill your
got from
Bisleri,
Freshwater supply
Goa.
बहुत कम है
Bisleri
अपने.
bottles are your fresh
Freshwater
water
supply, yeah.
drinking.
But yeah. And that
So-
is why the resulting in when water dumps into the ocean, that is why in the last 3 years, I think Akash would probably go over this later on, the dumping into the ocean is like, I think the rate has increased quadrupled in the last 10 or 15 years. So
what
like
Kevin
that,
just explains is a perfect example कि human activity से CO2 ऐसे increase हो रहा है, but the process which happens in the ocean is a natural process. We are not contributing, but it's like, so that's why both go hand in hand. It's not like कि, oh, only is a natural phenomena है. It's also because of human activities which is increasing the primary greenhouse gases, which in turn is causing all these natural processes on our
Kevin,
planet.
can you say कि in general कौन से सबसे blatantly agree with activities हमारे जो ये egregious activities कौन से हैं जो cause करते हैं?
the biggest contributors in for climate change is about 30% of that is burning fossil fuel to generate electricity. So when our population increases, this also increases. And
हमारे
our
फॉसिल
needs as a
फ्यूल्स कौन से होते हैं? ये हमारे फॉसिल फ्यूल्स हमारे वो है ना जो एंशिएंट टाइम से अर्थ में बरीड थे और जो एक नॉन रिन्यूएबल रिसोर्स ऐसे बोलते हैं ना, दे लाइक वी कैन
It's
नेवर गेट देम
non-renewable.
बैक वंस वी यूज देम, वी कांट गेट
Yeah.
देम बैक. सो कैन यू टेल अस कौन कौन से होते हैं हमारे मेन फॉसिल फ्यूल्स लाइक कोल, पेट्रोल,
Gas, natural gas.
gas? These are
These are
the
the three.
main
natural
ones,
gas,
right?
essentially. Our natural gas is converted into many forms that we are
Hmm.
consuming. So like your diesel and everything is just, diesel is less refined, petrol is a much more refined, and things like that. So your ethanol is part of it. There's multiple uh, uh, so essentially natural gas is what we use for generating electricity, heat, etc. Then the next is 15% of the problem is contributed by transportation. That includes public and
Private.
your private transportation. But the bigger contribution is our private contribution, private modes of transportation in that. Then your 13% is roughly manufacturing and construction. So these are known as the major heat trapping emissions. They are also listed under the heat trapping emissions because they basically produce the CO2, hardcore. And then agriculture. Agriculture, I was surprised. It is 11%. That's pretty close to
How does
manufacturing and
agriculture
construction itself.
add to this?
Methane emissions. So your animal, especially because of livestock.
Poultry
So
farm.
that so all
Poultry
these
farming.
numbers which Kevin said, it's a great reference point. If someone goes and researches, they will find different numbers, or they might find same numbers, right? Whole point is these are the broad categories which causes. So don't focus on the percentage kitna hai iska, because everyone everyone has their own data to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
these are
This is just a rough estimate
Yeah.
of
yeah, like
contributions.
I think Kevin ने जो main बताया वो था, like the main things that are causing
Exactly.
this is like excessive use of fossil fuels, then automobiles, then industries का issue आता है. Then I am, like he said, I did not know agriculture का 11% role है.
So agriculture में
I
interestingly,
would like to know.
it's not only about grazing and all. It's also about, because we even like dairy, for example,
The
we all
machinery.
think dairy is great, right? Yeah, it is good, but the problem is you need that kind of space, so वहाँ पे cows and they can graze, so you have to clear that much of land. So it's a cycle. You have to cut down trees, you have to give them food, cows को and सबको, and then they release. You have to sustain the cows for a longer time so you can get milk out of it, right? So all these processes, they cause a lot of impact on this greenhouse gases, specifically as Kevin mentioned, methane.
And agriculture is
These
today
damn
extremely
cows keep
commercialized.
farting.
And agriculture is
These damn
extremely
cows.
commercialized today as well, right? Because of a whole necessity. Our population so high, it has to be commercial, like it has to be automated, etc. So that's
Yeah.
also a contributor into the issue.
Mhm. Okay, so from there we'll just go into how climate change has affected the world. Amrit, first you can start us off by telling us about the disaster that happened in Uttarakhand.
No, like there are two very specific issues that I would like to focus on. पहले जो उत्तराखंड के बारे में हमने अभी उत्तराखंड में at the end of the month everyone was like learning a new word, like सब उसका full form बोलने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. It was like ये GLOF क्या होता है? Glacier Lake Outburst Flood. Like out of the blue, a terrible event happens, and we didn't know what it was. So and then अभी टेक्सास में there is snow and people are wondering कि यार ये power grid fail कैसी होगी, घर पे electricity क्यों नहीं है. So I think a simple way to understand everything is like Arnav and Kevin ने एक बहुत ढंग से हमें दिखाया है कि everything is interconnected. आप इस तरफ कुछ कर रहे हैं तो उस तरफ कुछ और हो रहा है. What has happened in Uttarakhand very specifically is this. You mentioned glaciers. What has happened in the Chamoli district is a glacial lake has overflown. Now, how does a flood like that happen? A flood like that happens, और हमारी सरकार ने वो निकाली थी, unfortunately अक्टूबर में गाइडलाइंस निकाली थी कि हो क्यों रही है. What climate change does is, let us first just simply understand कि ग्लेशियर लेक फॉर्म का होता है. एक ग्लेशियर लेक, किसी भी पहाड़ में आप किसी ग्लेशियर को देखेंगे, उसके बेस पे आपको एक ग्लेशियर लेक मिलेगा. ये बनता कैसे है? ग्लेशियर्स बहुत छोटी स्पीड में चलते रहते हैं. ऑल वी नीड टू नो इज दैट. सो एज दे मूव दे मे चेंज द टोपोग्राफी ऑफ द लैंड. तो वहां पे जो खड्डे बन जाते हैं और उसमें नेचुरली लेक्स फॉर्म होते थे. And these, we have to understand, these are the lakes which eventually flow and go into like हम सबको नॉर्मल जो फ्रेश वाटर मिलता है सब मिलता है वहीं से मिलता है. तो अब हुआ क्या है क्लाइमेट चेंज के बाद? When these lakes are actually formed, they are now being formed in locations quite different than anticipated. And we are not able to understand कि कब क्या कौन सा लेक टूटने वाला है, कितना फ्रैजाइल है, because the warming, as you guys described, तुमने बताया था कि एटमॉस्फेयर में 10 साल के, केविन ने बोला लास्ट 10 years में इतना चेंज हुआ है, ओशंस में सबसे ज्यादा कंट्रीब्यूशन आया है. सेम वे में आर ग्लेशियर के अराउंड इट्स वेरी हार्ड फॉर पीपल टू एंटिसिपेट कि कौन से ग्लेशियर लेक होने वाले हैं. एंड समझो पहाड़ों के एरियाज में देयर आर लाइक 1200 to 1300 such lakes that are currently there which are formed. कोई पहाड़ी इलाका है, ग्लेशियर लेक तो बनने ही वाला है. And what has happened here in Uttarakhand is one such lake randomly out of the blue overflew. और अब क्या है कि इसके सामने ना, इट्स an actual dam has not been built. नेचुरल डैम होते हैं बट दे कैनॉट होल्ड ऑन टू द सडन लीकेज. तो इट जब एक बार ये ओवरफ्लो हो गया तो इट विल कम डाउन डायरेक्टली. एंड व्हेन अ फ्लड कम्स, यार none of us is. We should all be very glad that we have not faced a natural disaster. हाँ, Arnav?
So Amrit, is it the glacier? It melted. Is that what happened, or what
No,
exactly?
no. The lake broke through. Like it literally a mixture of melting and like the natural dam not being able to just hold it back anymore. It just collapsed. क्योंकि तूने
The
literally
The
बोला
natural
dam
कि
dam.
collapsed.
It's not
the
a man-made
natural
dam.
dam,
Yeah.
the natural moraine
Oh,
dam
the
जो
natural
बोला
dam.
जाता है,
Yeah.
it collapsed. It's not
Yeah.
as strong as a man-made dam at all. तो
Right.
होता है क्या कि
Yeah.
जैसे गर्मी बढ़ी, जो तुमने बताया ना कि टेम्परेचर बढ़ा है ऐसे, तो
Mhm.
it is becomes very hard because गवर्नमेंट ने रेगुलेशंस निकाली थी कि the only way to stop this, याद रखो 2013 में केदारनाथ में भी हुआ था ये सेम ग्लेशियर लेक आउटबर्स्ट हुआ था। तो अभी इन्होंने ये निकाला था कि 2020 में गाइडलाइंस निकली थी कि वी नीड टू कॉम्बैट climate change very specifically because it's becoming hard to predict कि कब क्या होने वाला है. Essentially, we have people living in hilly areas who we cannot even warn. अब cyclone वगैरह में हम बोल सकते हैं लोगों को अभी currently we have reached that place. इसमें we do not know up in the there क्या होने वाला है. There is no predictive technologies does not exist at the moment to that extent. And preventive technology does not exist because तुम कितने डैम बनाओगे, सबके घर के सामने कितना बना सकते हो. So what has happened in Uttarakhand is there was a random flash flood and it just overtook the entire district. And the thing is, you cannot directly blame anyone because it's a universal problem. The helpless feeling about climate change is very specifically कि दिक्कत कहीं और से आ जाएगी. अभी हम टेक्सास का example which Kevin I pointlessly prepared and Kevin kept ruining it by mentioning it 5 separate times. Thing is,
Sorry.
टेक्सास में अभी क्या हुआ, टेक्सास में लोग कह रहे हैं कि इलेक्ट्रिसिटी चली गई. इलेक्ट्रिसिटी क्यों गई? 4 मिलियन लोगों की बहुत बड़ी कहानी है. देखो हमारे देश में कुछ होता है, लोग बोलते हैं कि ये बनाओ वो बनाओ ये बनाओ. टेक्सास में क्या हुआ, जहाँ पे लोगों ने ठंड नहीं देखी थी इतने टाइम से, वहां पे जरा सी ठंड की वेव ज्यादा बढ़ गई. एसेंशियली ग्रू गॉट वेरी कोल्ड. तो क्या किया सबने हीटर ज्यादा यूज किया. हीटर इतना ज्यादा यूज किया कि पावर ग्रिड ही उड़ गया. एंड और इमेजिन करना पड़ेगा कि वहाँ के जो लोग हैं जिनको एसेंशियली आदत है कि यार बहुत एनर्जी कंजम्पशन इतना हाई है, उनका एंटायर पावर ग्रिड उड़ गया. मतलब ऐसी क्या भयंकर ठंड आई होगी कि लोग
The
सह नहीं
solution
पाए.
was easy though.
इतना क्या कोल्ड वेव आया कि लोग सबने हीटर ऑन किया और फिर क्या हुआ, पावर ग्रिड उड़ गया, किसी के
Ted
पास लाइट
Cruz fixed the solution.
बात
He went
खत्म.
to Cancun. He's just gone to Cancun. He's fine. He's happy. Everyone in Texas should just go to Cancun.
So
No,
just for
he
our
might have
audience,
said that.
अबे
he is
Yeah,
one of the
senator. He's a
senators वहाँ पे. That just for the
he's बहुत रोमांचक
No,
इंसान
Akash,
है,
he was
बहुत मस्त बातें करते हैं. बट
he
बात
was
ये
going to say
है, thankfully they didn't build a
wanted to
wall.
build another wall. He wanted to
Go to
build another wall.
Cancun.
No, this time he'll build a wall where they doesn't have to come back to Texas. I
That's
think
right.
इस बार उल्टा होने वाला है, क्योंकि अगर यहाँ पे, क्योंकि बात वो है ना, हम क्लाइमेट चेंज को सीरियसली इसलिए नहीं लेते क्योंकि डायरेक्टली हम हिट नहीं होते. बात ये है कि हम हिट हो रहे हैं, इट्स जस्ट वी हैवंट पेड द प्राइस येट. We are already paying a thing about it. Like these are smaller events. Like abhi in the city, in the city of Trivandrum, it is सुबह temperatures are down. Like मैं अपने parents को दिल्ली वगैरह से लेके आके लाया था, बोलते हुए कि यहाँ पे तो पूरे टाइम समर होता है, आप क्या टेंशन ले रहे हो. But यहाँ पे सुबह chill है. Like it's colder than normal, and each year it's getting a bit weirder. Rains are more sporadic. होते हैं तो
Exactly.
ज्यादा हो जाते हैं कि फ्लडिंग हो जाती है. यहाँ पे 3 नेचुरल फ्लड्स देखे मैंने ओवर द लास्ट कोर्स ऑफ 3 years एंड इट्स लाइक रिडिकुलस टू इवन इमेजिन कि ये ऐसा कैसे हो रहा है. क्योंकि इंडिया में जितना भी हम बोले डैम वगैरह का स्ट्रक्चर काफी है, दे डू एग्जिस्ट. लाइक हिली एरियाज में एक चीज है, यहाँ पे प्लेन्स में फ्लड हो रहे हैं यार. So it is around us, but they are interconnected. The two most recent events, especially Uttarakhand is like literally nature telling us कि देखो तुम मजाक बहुत हो गया तुम्हारा. आधे सेकंड में हम I can change the dimensions of whatever you're talking about. And Texas में it's like it doesn't matter if you think you're so-called developed. If even if you think that कहीं और वो गर्मी बढ़ रही है, suddenly अगर ठंड आ गई, पैटर्न बदल गया, तो I can wipe out your entire system.
So
I think
No,
that's why we
Texas,
initially mentioned कि जो weather patterns they all are, even though I think Amrit ने mentioned कि until it hits us, right, all these things are already hitting us in different pockets and it's a weather change, But these weather changes are caused by all this climate change which is happening, which is increasing the global temperature, right? It's a very, like as Amrit mentioned कि ज़्यादा बारिश हो रही है कहीं, या कहीं ज़्यादा ठंड पड़ रही है. So all these are interconnected, and I would highly suggest people go and read about all these water cycles, how these things happen. It's not just increase in temperature. उसके effects क्या हैं? People don't focus on that.
Every
Also,
part of the world. ऐसी कोई जगह नहीं है जहाँ पे ये
also
नहीं हो रहा. By the way, just
Yeah.
if
people
anybody
get,
thinks that they are
due
in
to
a
the
safe
location,
place.
geographical location as well, other countries get hit even worse. Like you guys said, India flooding. So
Right.
yeah,
Right,
Japan
Japan
earthquakes.
में
They
इतने earthquake
have
हो रहे हैं.
earthquake day in Japan to prepare for earthquakes, to let them know how to.
And people have different effects
Yep.
depending on their area. Like some people are going through like huge winters, and some people are going through drought periods.
Right.
It's different. It's hard to
Wasn't
predict where
didn't Latin
what is
America have
happening in
like
each
a
place.
7 to
Yeah.
8 year drought that's
So
still
what
going
I found
ongoing
out is
right
like
now? Abhi.
all these
Yeah,
natural
a bunch of
disasters are in
countries.
somewhere all linked to climate change. Maybe it's not directly linked as being the main cause of any disaster, but it definitely contributes to the like intensity of it. For example, I'll start off with the
Definitely.
typhoon that happened in Philippines in November in 2020. So climate change wasn't the cause, but it created a huge, like a much stronger typhoon due to the rising sea levels and the heat in the atmosphere, which is how typhoons are created. So, and then we see it in other disasters like the Australian fires, which again, climate change wasn't a direct cause of it, but it aggravated it because of due to rising temperatures. It was actually reported that climate change boosted the risk of the Australian bushfires by at least 30%. So that's also, it basically added to a worse
Yeah,
situation
and I
by
think
making it more worse.
Guys, small question. Typhoon,
2020
hurricane और cyclone तीनों same चीज होते हैं ना?
I'm not sure honestly. I think
No, I know typhoon, hurricane and cyclone तीनों same नहीं होते. Okay.
I think
I thought
same
they're
होते
all
हैं.
three
Just no, I think they are
in
same.
different. I think different parts में they are called different hills. Tornado is the circular wind thing. Circular wind thing that starts, right? वो तो land पे होता है, but ये तो hurricane भी तो पानी से आके जमीन पे गिरेगा ना, या
I
जमीन से कहाँ
guess,
से पानी
yeah,
निकलेगा?
maybe I think Amrit's actually right. Actually, it's just different terms used for different areas. I think actually.
it depends on each. Okay, it depends on where it is happening. The typhoon and hurricane are also the same. Essentially, when it happens from northwest Pacific, it's referred to
Yeah,
as typhoon,
region.
and when it's eastern northern Pacific and
Hmm.
central northern
Yeah.
Pacific, it's called a hurricane. So
Okay.
they are essentially the same effect, but it depends on which
World.
part of the
मतलब basically पानी
of the body
Yeah,
it's happening.
sorry.
a large body of water is carried and wipes out the coast, right? Isn't that what happens?
Right. In
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
I think these three are same. Based, I think India mein it's always called
The
Cyclone.
and the typhoon basically
cyclone.
takes the whole
Cyclone.
moisture from the water and it's mixed with heat as well, and the heat causes more air to flow, and it's a whole scientific, yeah,
Oh, and that's why
kind
it
of the
creates
eye of
that.
the storm basically is created because of that. But
Pirates of the
Oh, and
Caribbean.
Australian wildfires to the 2020. Like another thing that linked was I was in Australia at that time. So like that was also the
yeah,
most driest period and the hottest period of the year that in their history like it's ever been recorded. So that's why it's kind of linked
that's how
as well to this
that's how
issue
the
of
Australian fire
climate
started.
change.
If I'm not mistaken, it was a lightning on this dry land, a lightning
Yeah.
strike hit, and the fires just
यार वो कहते नहीं उसमें कुछ
And
बहुत सारी species का loss हुआ था ऑस्ट्रेलिया
yes,
में.
a lot of species that will not be able to recover at all. They've said
a
so. It's
billion
a huge
animals
loss.
died.
Yeah,
Billion. That's
Can't imagine that number.
huge loss.
मतलब I don't even
It's
know
crazy.
कितना होता है.
वही ना, जब तक I think
So
people don't realize human life का impact नहीं आता ना, तब तक people just take it lightly.
यार
unfortunately.
अर्नब, अभी मैंने कुछ पढ़ा ड्यूरिंग द मैं कोरोना के ऊपर कुछ पढ़ रहा था, तो वो कह रहे थे ऐसे 1897 में जब 1896 में ब्यूबोनिक प्लेग हुआ था, उसमें कुछ 15 साल के लिए हुआ प्लेग और कुछ 6 से 8 मिलियन लोग ऐसे ही मर गए. एंड आई वाज लाइक 6 से 8 मिलियन क्या, कितने लाख हुआ, ये क्या क्या बात कर रहे हैं? बट इट्स सच अ ह्यूज नंबर.
एंड इमेजिन उस टाइम तो ये तो एस्टिमेट्स हैं, एक्चुअल नंबर माइट बी वेरी डिफरेंट, क्योंकि उस टाइम तो इतना कुछ था नहीं, डेटा कलेक्शन और सब, राइट? सो आई मीन इट्स हार्ड टू ट्रैक दैट टाइम. अभी भी नंबर्स नहीं पता कोरोना के टाइम पे, वी डोंट हैव द एग्जैक्ट नंबर्स ऑफ हाउ मच इट हैज स्प्रेड एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स. सो
And one or two areas of Australia, like the fire actually spread because it was man made, like how man activities are affecting it. Like so,
As
they
in?
were burning dry leaves and like unwanted grass, and that's how. And
But
during the dry period,
केविन, इनका
some
खुद का
some parts of Australia got.
इनका खुद का घर नहीं जलेगा अगर ये ऐसे करेंगे तो?
No, they divide, right? So they essentially build like a wall of mud to separate that. So to not but it gets out of control. So it won't. They'll safeguard their house, but the fire there's four other directions where the fire can spread. So there were some fires that were happened in some of the areas. It happened because of these activities. So now Australia has banned that. Essentially, you cannot do
But
those
that's
things.
ridiculous if that's what happened. Like if they
No,
that's
that
like,
is not the major. Again, let me correct that. Like, I just wanted to put that as an example how a direct
होगा.
activity from a guy,
ये
from human beings is affecting the
कैलिफोर्निया
situation.
में सेम रीजन से हुआ था, लाइटनिंग वगैरह से.
California, I'm honestly not sure about California how it started.
Wow.
But
Dry
again, the
weather.
fire,
it happens so frequently that I have lost track कि कब किसके
yeah,
उससे होता है.
it's
नहीं,
happened.
पर होता क्यों है वहाँ पे?
प्राइमरली राइट नहीं, बिकॉज ड्राइनेस होती है वहाँ पे, वो गर्म
Yeah.
हीट और से सब ट्रीज ड्राई होते हैं, जो भी यहाँ पे ग्रास सब ड्राई है, एंड व्हेन लाइटनिंग स्ट्राइक्स दैट्स वन ऑफ द मेन रीजंस व्हिच हैपेंस. समटाइम्स इट्स आल्सो बिकॉज ऑफ, आई हैव हर्ड, बिकॉज ऑफ सम ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज. Someone,
Human activities.
I don't know how true it is, but someone goes वहाँ पे, they either they have some sort of party or they have some sort of,
But
Campfires.
the most
yeah.
So now,
most
Post
recent
trigger.
one was that most recent one. I can't remember. Was that the lightning or was that because I remember like people were posting pictures of like the sky orange when they wake
Yeah.
up, like it was completely orange. I was like,
Yeah, so some people
shit.
say it was because of lightning, but at the same time I've heard reports that someone had a gender reveal party वहाँ पे. I don't know how true that information is.
I,
Yeah.
It might be a and that might have
Yeah,
started.
that's.
could be.
Who knows what?
So when I was, I think Arnav, when we were, I think when we were there also in California, we had gone on a trip and we were stuck in one of these issues, like when there was complete blackout. So now one thing that like California is trying to do is like when there is certain periods where they feel that okay now it's dangerous, they put on they say like avoid any fire, outside activities, etc.
In fact,
Like
they switch off the power grid
no
itself.
barbecuing.
So वहाँ
Does
पे
that
कोई blast ना हो
because of
सके
power
और वो
grid.
सब.
Does
So
that
there's no
oh, they turn it off like that? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Probably they have
And
to
you're
do
not
stuff
allowed
like
to
that.
light fire or anything like that. If
Yeah.
an insurance company finds out that you were lighting any kind of candles during that period, you will not get the compensation.
अबे
that
पर
you
अगर
need. That's
पावर
it.
ग्रिड ऑफ है,
Kevin,
तो लोगों के घर का सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम भी बंद होगा ना, तो फिर तो
Yes,
वो वाली
they
मूवी हो
try
जाएगी.
to, no, they try to evacuate वहाँ पे. They have evacuation orders पहले ही कि we'll be shutting
Oh,
off
okay,
power,
okay.
and these are the zones which you should avoid completely.
Okay.
Kevin, were you there when this happened? The fire?
Yeah, we were actually in the woods in like a
So,
cabin.
Kevin,
So
Arnav
another
were-
was,
question I have. Wait, Kevin, you were there for Australia and you were there for California. I just wanted our audience. I'm
don't
just
follow
worried
me.
about Kevin.
Like, do these
Kev-
issues follow me? Are you
Is
saying
Kevin
that?
the person? Is
And
Kevin
when
the person who started
Abbe,
these
and
fires?
he came to India in December 2019 or Corona.
Oh my god!
Corona.
oh,
Oh,
by the way,
Such-
he went to
Oh my
he went to
God.
Mumbai 2 weeks back, and Mumbai में cases बढ़ गए हैं.
And he's
Kevin,
and his
Kevin, what are you?
I'm
and
like-
and his phone is from Wuhan also, I heard. ऐसा सुनने में आया, पता नहीं.
Okay. Now you're getting a bit too overboard. Let's just get back on topic.
Yeah, let's get back on the topic. But I think इसमें one thing, since we can only focus on human activities के, right? We cannot focus on जो natural चीजें हो रही हैं. I think वहाँ पे Kevin mentioned कि carbon dioxide and methane है. Lots of people don't realize कि they only target, they only think कि अरे electric cars आ जाएंगी तो everything will be sorted out because they are one of the
No.
major contributors. और अगर
Yeah.
cement अच्छे नए टाइप का सीमेंट आ गया, because even that contributes to the way we build our houses. It takes a huge hit on climate change also.
Are you saying
So-
Ambuja cement is not good?
It is not good. Like
Just
the way
cement
the
is
construction
ugly.
happens, it's actually pretty bad for climate change. So I think lots of people don't realize that now it's already high time that we have to combat this thing from all sides. Like it's not agriculture and electricity or energy generation तो main तो है, but उसके अलावा भी like even how we build houses, how we live day to day basis पे. So I think all these things have to be done simultaneously now.
Arnav, इनका
Or it's too
solution
late.
can we talk about in our super special part 2
That,
podcast?
yes, we'll talk.
No, yeah,
on our
we're
part
not going
two
into
of the
solutions
podcast.
right now. I just wanted to mention कि
But
it's already high time कि that we start focusing on all the sides.
Arnav,
See,
will you
when I was
sniff?
living
Will
for
you
Australian,
will you sniff the Vicks again एक बार? Arnav is
when
पूरे
I
but
was in
episode में
the
Vicks सूंघ रहा है.
when I was in Australia during the fires, right? One of the things that used to like your digestion and stuff gets affected immensely. I mean, you feel sick. It's not just breathing. Like you have like as in people face like what do you call it? What is the term
Kangaroo.
when you can't?
Kangaroo खाया तूने? तूने kangaroo खाया था क्या?
No, essentially people have like loose motion. There was like Australia had huge number of cases of bad loose motion cases
अबे
because of the smoke. Your
हाजमोला
Yeah.
खा
digestion cycle gets affected.
हाजमोला खा लिया करो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. ये क्या टट्टी पॉटी करने की बातें कर रहा है? Kevin, हम serious बातें
I
कर
thought
रहे
Kevin was
हैं.
going to be like, our minds got affected. Everyone was like, I was like, Kevin, stay off the weed, man. What are you doing? And he said diarrhea. I was like, oh my god.
That can be an after effect. तुझे कैसे पता?
Yeah, I never do. I mean, Amrit used to vomit after smoking. I mean, Amrit never smoked. But I forgot to mention, we talked about droughts. So first, the East Africa droughts that occurred for many years. I think the most severe were 2011, 17, and 19. So these droughts actually wiped out crops and livestock, which, like Amrit had, it's an effect on the people, how it affected Texas. This resulted in people unable to put food on their tables. So, and climate change basically has contributed by doubling the likelihood of these droughts, which is the same for Central America. We mentioned El Nino earlier, which is the period which droughts occur, where the temperatures rise and everything. So this period actually gets supercharged by the climate crisis, and that area saw its sixth year of drought at the time, which, if I'm not wrong, was near the years in the 2010 to 2016 years. So these were like huge droughts that affected that whole area, and it was just made worse and worse by climate change. And people are now predicting when the real severe El Nino period will
So
return.
Akash, from what I understand, ये जो El Nino, that's a natural phenomenon. It happens
That's
every
a
time, right?
Yeah.
it's an ocean
It
current
happens
ना.
every time.
It's an
Yeah,
ocean
so it
current का El
happens-
It
Nino
happens
बोलते हैं ना.
every yeah.
But
It
because of
happens
this
every time. El Nina as well, which
because
is
of
the
this
other
global
way. That's the positive.
because of global warming, it just उसका impact काफी ज़्यादा हो जाता है. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
And I think
how
they're not
climate change
able
and global
to
warming.
predict कि यहाँ पे अखबार में वो बोलते रहते हैं जब भी हमारे इंडिया की दो प्राइमरी साउथ वेस्ट और नॉर्थ ईस्ट जो मानसून है उन पे सीवियर इफेक्ट पड़ता है कि किस तरीके से दिस करंट इज अफेक्टिंग इट. तो
Because that's something lots of people should focus on कि it's not just कि जो natural चीजें हो रही हैं उसका intensity भी बढ़ रही है because of climate. It's not only what we are doing, right? जो natural
No,
चीजें
I
होने ही
think I think that way we have like I think and in our very lame attempt हमने basic ये दिखा दिया कि यार essentially climate change to some extent
Amplifies.
होता क्या है and also some
Right.
current events which are directly which show you that how interrelated everything is, because I think one of our primary attempts in even trying this episode, because हम में से कोई expert तो है नहीं इसमें यार, primary attempts was कि यार आपको बस दिखा दें कि ये जो चीज है this is not some abstract political conspiracy, this is something that is already happening in small ways around us. Then the worst thing about this entire thing is कि it does not give us one common thing to focus on. जैसे केविन ने बोला ना different चार broad चीजें हैं, but I'm sure there are a lot more smaller subdivisions of things that cause this effect. I'm pretty sure there must be more also, but it is important कि हम किसी न किसी तरीके से इसे tackle अपने अपने तरीके से करें, and I think we can focus on that in a different session. But yeah.
Yeah, I think because that
So-
can be whole episode in itself.
Another fact, just to round this off, is that we should act on it. The United Nations Environment Program estimates that adapting to climate change and coping with damages will cost developing countries 140 to 300 billion per year.
Per year.
So per year.
Oh wow.
भाई अभी
No,
देख ले
once it
अभी
reaches that bad, Is that once it reaches like a certain level?
Yeah,
I
by
think
they're
it's
2030, nearly. We're
And
going up to
bhai, and
2030,
these
they
are
were estimating.
understand this. Every model that is being made is estimated based on कि पहले
These
पिछले
are
10 साल में क्या हुआ है. But already
And
जिस
our
rate में
models have
चीजें
failed.
yeah, and what is escalation जिस तरीके से हो रहा है, doomsday is not particularly that far away in these things. Because अभी जो floods थे, किसी ने expect नहीं किए थे, and it
Yeah.
happened out of the blue. All of these
And
things
to
are
be
happening out
honest,
of the blue.
maybe our lifetime we might not have problem, but definitely the next
I think
Future
I
generation
think
will
I
have
generations
think
will
Kevin
face
I
even
future
think
bigger.
I think
generations.
Kevin before as we should really round this up and go into this, but that's the wrong approach in my opinion, because we should
Yeah.
never say it will not happen in our lifetime. It
It's
is
already
No,
happening.
no, as in
already happening in
no,
our
no, as
lifetime.
in we,
No, the serious
as in
effect,
we,
as Kevin is saying, like the
as in we
major
won't.
effect.
It won't be like it might not be. It might not become like such that the humanity's existence is in question. That level, it might
नहीं,
not
so I
happen.
think
But
वहाँ पे
maybe
I want
200
to
years down the line, there can be a even bigger issue where our existence itself is a question.
I think वहाँ पे I want to bring one point कि because what happens is कि it's not going to happen suddenly कि humanity is at stake, right? ऐसा कभी suddenly नहीं होने
Yeah.
वाला कि
No.
अरे कि अचानक दुनिया खत्म हो गई एक दिन में. I mean that doesn't happen. So I think we have to understand कि I think humanity is already in a pretty we already
Precarious
late for
place.
this scenario. Yeah. I don't think we should think कि अरे अपनी next generation होगी because what's happening right now, for example जो भी उत्तराखंड में हुआ, people who have been impacted, they're already
Affected by it.
suffering it. Texas, Australia, California. I mean, all these places which you mentioned right now, they're already suffering in
The
these.
major places.
Yeah, and these never used to happen earlier, right? From based on whatever we know. So I think we are already too late for it because people are saying कि अभी जो मैंने mention किया कि 1 degree से temperature बढ़ गया है, it's going towards 1.5 degree, and people say if it rises up to 2 or 2.5 degree, there is no returning back, right? Right now, people say we still
Yeah.
have time if we act with our full resources right now in the next 50 100 years. उसके बाद there is no going back. So I think people need to understand कि it's not about the future generation, it's about current generation जहाँ पे अभी अपन रह रहे हैं, we might get impacted tomorrow. So that's one point which we should remember.
And temperature might still increase, but we are at least not going to. We are trying to like prolong that effect as long as possible, so that we can figure out a solution, a permanent solution for it.
Yes,
Essentially.
मस्क का पोता हमको मार्स ले जाएगा.
Kevin, Interpol will be knocking at your door in 30 minutes to question you about your whereabouts during the Australian fires and the California fires and India's
I'm
coronavirus
like
problem.
I'm like the new version of like some bad omen ka movie or something.
Panoti, Kevin, you used to call me Panoti, right?
We did. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I used to call Arnav Panati.
So that's here we'll end this episode of the Vele podcast. Thank you guys for listening. As usual, you can catch us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Give us a follow at Vele Pod on Instagram as well. And until next time, stay safe, guys. Be careful. Bye.
Bye.